Dear Boomers, today we're going to talk about the loneliness that nobody talks about. What if loneliness is not being alone or about being alone? What if loneliness is sitting in a crowded room, surrounded by family, surrounded by noise, surrounded by the people who love you, and still feeling like nobody truly sees you? There is a quote often attributed to Carl Jung, the psychologist philosopher, that says, "Loneliness is not the absence of people around us, but the inability to express what truly matters within us." When I first heard these words, I thought, yes, yes, yes. That is the loneliness so many people carry quietly, not the loneliness of an empty house, not the loneliness of eating dinner alone, not even the loneliness of losing a spouse, a friend, a parent, or a familiar way of life. These are very painful, yes. They are very deeply painful. But there is another kind of loneliness that goes even deeper. It is the loneliness of having something inside you that has never found a safe place to land. A truth, a grief, a longing, a regret, a dream, a memory, a spiritual question, a fear about aging, a fear about death, a fear that life is changing faster than you can name it. And nobody asks, or worse, someone does ask, but they do not really want to hear the answer. That is what we are all experiencing, I think. Our true nature is hidden. So the loneliness beneath the loneliness. We often think loneliness means there are no people around. But some of the loneliest people in the world are not physically isolated at all. They are married. They have children. They go to church. They attend family gatherings. And they answer the phone. They smile at the grocery store. They say, "I'm fine." But inside, there is an entire universe no one has entered. Not even the person who is experiencing the loneliness. This is the loneliness Jung was pointing towards. The loneliness of being unable to communicate what matters most. And for boomers and seniors, this can become especially painful because by the time we reach the later chapters of life, we are not empty, we are full. Full of stories, full of memories. We are full of mistakes we made and survived, and full of people we loved who are no longer here. And they are here in our hearts, still speaking to us. We are full of the questions we may have postponed for decades. We are full of wisdom we earned the hard way. And yet in our culture, older adults are often expected to become quieter, less visible, and we are expected to become less complicated, less emotionally demanding. And people may ask about your blood pressure, your medications, your appointments, your lab results, but how often do they ask, what are you carrying in your heart? What do you wish somebody understood about you? What part of your life still needs a witness? And what truth have you never had permission to speak? This is where loneliness begins to harden. We are not simply in the absence of company, but in the absence of being deeply known. So there are things like social isolation is not just emotional. It affects the whole entire body. So social isolation is not just a sad feeling, it is a whole person experience. The body notices, the nervous system notices, the immune system notices, the heart notices, the brain notices. The CDC identifies loneliness and social isolation as risk factors connected with serious health outcomes, including heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, depression, anxiety, dementia, and early death. And this matters because many older adults are not just socially isolated by choice. They may be isolated by loss, by retirement, by disability, by no longer driving, by chronic pain, by caregiving, by hearing loss, by shame, by financial stress, by the death of a spouse, by children who are busy, by friends who moved away, became ill, or passed on, by a world that has become increasingly digital, fast, and impersonal. And then we tell people just get out more. I don't know. But loneliness is not always solved by proximity. You can sit in a senior center and still feel lonely. You can attend a family reunion and still feel empty and lonely. You can scroll Facebook for an hour and still feel unseen because everybody there is doing so well, or so they say. Because what the soul longs for is not just contact, it is for connection. The soul longs for connection, and connection requires more than being near another person. It requires emotional safety. It requires listening and curiosity, and it requires someone willing to say, "Tell me more. I want to understand." You do not have to edit yourself here, and you do not have to go forth all by yourself. So why do we stop expressing what matters? Because some people have stopped expressing what mattered because no one listened when they were young. Some learned early that certain feelings were not welcome. They do not cry, they do not complain, they do not make a fuss, they do not talk about death, they do not talk about money, religion, they do not talk about family secrets, and they do not talk about depression, and they do not talk about regret. They do not talk about spiritual doubt, and they do not talk about the loneliness inside a marriage. And they do not talk about the grief of becoming invisible. And so, little by little, people become fluent in silence, not peaceful silence. They become experts at changing the subject when things become a little heavy and intense. And they learn how to protect others from their own truth. They become pleasant, helpful, and they become responsible, easy to be around, but inside something is waiting, not for advice and not for fixing, not for correction, but for witness. This is such a powerful word, witness. To be witnessed means somebody can sit with the truth of your life without turning away. Someone can hear your grief without rushing you into gratitude. And somebody can hear your fear without shaming you for having it. And somebody can hear your memories without saying, "That was a long time ago." And somebody can hear your spiritual questions without handing you a slogan. And somebody can hear your loneliness without treating it like a personal failure. Because loneliness is not a character flaw, it is a signal. It is the soul saying this: I need connection that is real, and I need a place where my inner life can breathe and can flourish. That is what we all need. And by knowing that, we can be better witnesses for not only ourselves, but for other people. So, what is the difference between being alone and being lonely? This is a holy kind of aloneness. Many people come to enjoy solitude as they age, and they enjoy quiet mornings, a cup of coffee, and they enjoy a favorite chair, the dog sleeping nearby, or a cat purring on your lap, the soft rhythm of the house, and the freedom to think your own thoughts. Solitude can be healing and not lonely, and solitude can be sacred. Solitude can be the place where we hear God or our own conscience or the deep whisper of our inner self. But loneliness feels different, and solitude fills you. Loneliness is draining, but solitude restores your inner world. Loneliness convinces you that your inner world does not matter. Solitude says, I am with myself. Loneliness says, no one would understand me anyway. But that is where the danger actually lies. Not in being alone, but in believing that what is inside you is unwanted. That your stories are boring, and that your needs are burdensome, and that your grief is too much, and that your dreams are too late, and that your wisdom is outdated. How can wisdom be outdated? But people feel that it is, moving too fast, and that your presence no longer matters, but none of that is true. Loneliness can make untrue things feel convincing. Aging and loss and the ache of becoming invisible. One of the most painful forms of loneliness in later life is invisibility. You walk into a doctor's office and people speak to the younger person beside you. You share an opinion and someone smiles politely but does not really hear it. You mention a dream and somebody says, at your age? And you talk about grief and people say, well, you have to move on. It's time. It's time to move on. And you talk about fear and people say, don't think that way. And you talk about loneliness and people say, but you have so much to be grateful for. And of course that is true. And gratitude is beautiful. But gratitude should never be used to silence pain. It can be grateful. You can be grateful and lonely at the same time. You can be blessed and grieving at the same time. And you can love your family and still need deeper conversation. You can have faith and still feel afraid. And you can be strong and still need someone to sit beside you. And this is where we need a more compassionate conversation about aging. Because older adults do not simply need activities. And they need meaning. They need to not simply fill their loneliness with entertainment. They need belonging, and they do not simply need someone to check on them. They need someone to know them. That is a difference. A welfare check asks, are you okay? A soul check says, what is it like to be you right now? And the quiet epidemic of unspoken things. Yes, so much loneliness comes from unspoken things, things that people are afraid to talk about, the apology that's never been given, and the forgiveness that's never been received, the dream that was abandoned, and the child who does not call, the sibling conflict that never healed, the marriage that was complicated, the faith that changed, the body that no longer feels familiar, and the fear of needing help, and the fear of asking for help, and the fear of being a burden, the fear of dying before your story has been fully told. These are not small things. They are the deep human things. And yet many people carry them alone because they do not know where to put them. This is why social isolation is not only about transportation or housing or health care access, although those are important. It is also about emotional access. Who has access to the real you? Who gets to hear what matters to you? And who knows what still hurts? Who knows what still gives you hope? And who knows what you are still longing for? And perhaps you don't even know. And perhaps the most important question is, do you know how to express these things to yourself? Because sometimes we are lonely, not only because others do not hear us, because we may not be listening to ourselves, and because we have not allowed ourselves to hear ourselves, because so much noise and so much distraction, even as we age. A Jungian thought, the unlived life. Carl Jung often explored the hidden parts of the psyche, the parts we repress, deny, or have undeveloped. And there is a loneliness that comes from the unlived life. The part of you that wanted to paint, the part of you that wanted to write, and the part of you that wanted to travel, or the part of you that wanted to run a marathon or wanted to climb trees, and the part of you that wanted to speak up, the part of you that wanted a different kind of love other than romantic love, the part of you that wanted to be brave sooner than this, and the part of you that wanted to stop pleasing everyone. That is a hard habit to break. And the part of you that knew there was a lot more than what you are acknowledging in this moment. In later life, these unlived parts can start knocking. Not to torture us, but to be integrated, to be acknowledged, and to be welcomed home. Maybe the point is not to regret what we did not do. Maybe the point is to ask this question: what still wants expression through me now? Not 20 years ago, and not when the children were young, and not when the career was active, but not when the body was stronger. Now, what still wants expression now? A poem, a prayer, a song, a conversation, a garden, a friendship, a memoir, a community, a spiritual practice, a new beginning, a single honest sentence. Sometimes healing begins with one sentence. I have been lonely. I miss who I used to be. I am afraid. I still have dreams. And I need deeper conversations, insightful conversations. I want to be known. I want meaningful exchanges. I do not want to disappear. That sentence can become a doorway. How we begin to heal social isolation. Healing loneliness does not require a dramatic reinvention of your life. It begins with small acts of truth. One honest phone call, one coffee date where you do not pretend, one support group, one community gathering, one journal page, and one prayer. One conversation with someone who can listen. One decision to stop saying, I'm fine, when you are not fine. The U.S. Surgeon General Advisory on Social Connection describes loneliness and isolation as major public health concerns and emphasizes that social connection is tied to health and well-being across the lifespan. But we must remember this. Conversation and connection is not just being included in a group. Connection is being met. That means we need spaces where older adults can speak honestly about what life feels like now. Not just the cheerful parts, not just the hobbies, not just the grandchildren. But the real terrain of aging is the losses, the transitions, the spiritual questions, the body changes, the fear of dependence, the longing for purpose, the need for friendship, and the desire to still matter. And yes, the possibility of joy, because loneliness is not healed only by discussing pain. It is also healed by rediscovering delight and laughter and music and even a few dancing steps, especially our pets, our dogs and our cats and birds, rabbits, movement and service and creativity, shared meals, shared silence, shared stories, because one person saying me too can soften years of isolation. What to do? What should we do if we feel lonely? So if you are listening to this and someone says, yes, that is me, please hear this gently. There is nothing wrong with you, and it's not your fault. Loneliness does not mean you failed at life. It does not mean you are weak, and it does not mean you are ungrateful. And it means some part of you is asking for connection, expression, and belonging. So start small. That's the main thing. Do not ask yourself to fix your whole life by Friday. And ask yourself this: what is the one thing I have not been able to say? And then write it down. Not for publication, but not for judgment, and just for the truth. We just want the truth. And then ask this: who is one safe person who might be able to hear a small piece of this? Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Choose carefully. Start gently. You might say this: I don't need advice. I just need you to listen. Or, I've been feeling more isolated than I let on. Or, there is something I've been carrying and I think I need to say it out loud. Or, I miss having deeper conversations, deeper, meaningful conversations. These are brave sentences and questions, And if you do not have a person like that right now, find a structured place, a smart support group like the Dear Boomers community, a spiritual community, a grief group, a writing group, a senior center class, yoga, Tai Chi, a therapist, a trusted online community, a group where the purpose is not performance but presence. Because the cure for loneliness is not simply more people, it is more truth in the presence of safe people. And it is what we are seeking now. What to do if somebody in your life is lonely? And if you love someone who may be isolated, here is something important. Do not assume that because they say, I'm fine, that they are fine. Do not assume that because they have visitors that they feel connected. And do not assume that because they are independent that they are not lonely. And better questions are this. Instead of only asking, do you need anything? Try asking this. What has been on your mind lately? What do you miss the most? What do you wish people understood about this season of your life? And what gives you comfort these days? What feels hard that you do not usually talk about? And what story from your life have you never really told me? And then listen. Do not rush to fix. Don't tell your own stories. Do not interrupt with your, something that has happened to you. And do not correct any feelings. Do not say you shouldn't feel that way. Because feelings are not court cases. They do not need a defense. And they need room, because sometimes the greatest gift we can give another human being is not advice. It is presence, a steady nervous system, a conscious breathing together and a patient ear, a willingness to sit in the sacred discomfort of another person's truth. The spiritual side of loneliness. There is also a spiritual invitation inside loneliness, not because loneliness is good, but because loneliness can reveal where the soul is asking for deeper alignment. Because sometimes loneliness asks, where have I abandoned myself? Where have I silenced my own truth? And where have I traded authenticity for approval? Where have I stayed connected to people who cannot meet me while avoiding the people who might? And where am I being invited to become more honest? There is a kind of loneliness that can become a threshold, a doorway, a summons. It says that come closer to your own soul. Listen to what you have been avoiding. Speak what has been buried. Find your people. Stop performing. And stop performing okayness. Let yourself be known. And maybe this is one of the great tasks of aging, not to become smaller, and not to become quieter. Not to disappear gracefully, and not to become more true, more whole. We are here to become more willing to say, this is who I am now, and this is what I have learned. This is what I still need And this is what I still love, because love is at the center of all things, and hope is centered in loving, in the present loving moment. And this is what truly matters to me. So think of it this way. Perhaps Jung's quote is not simply about loneliness, because it is about expression. The soul becomes lonely when it has no language. The heart becomes lonely when it has no witness. The mind becomes lonely when it believes its deepest thoughts are unwelcome. And the older we get, the more important it is to create spaces where truth is not rushed, grief is not corrected, and wisdom is not dismissed. Because social isolation is not only a public health issue, it is a human issue, a spiritual issue, and a community issue, and maybe even a sacred invitation to listen. It is a sacred invitation to listen better, to ask better questions, to tell the truth more gently, and to stop confusing busyness with belonging, to stop confusing proximity with intimacy, and to stop confusing silence with peace, because some silence is peaceful, but some silence is loneliness wearing a polite face. So today, ask yourself this: what have I been unable to express? And what matters within me that has not yet been spoken? And who might be safe enough to hear this? And if no one comes to mind, begin with yourself. Write it down, and write it when you wake up in the morning, because that's when you're most clear. And you can pray and speak it into the quiet room. Let the truth know it is welcome, because you are not too old to be known. You are not too late to belong. You are not a burden. You are not invisible. Your inner life is still a very beautiful thing. And your story matters. And your longing still matters. And perhaps the healing of loneliness begins the moment we dare to say this: this is what truly matters within me, and I intend to speak it. If this message touched something within yourself, you can join our Dear Boomers community, and please subscribe to the channel. This is where we talk about the deeper things: aging, grief, purpose, hope, and courage to keep becoming the heroic human that we are.